This Organized Chaos video is brought to you by Gems Art Studio. This video is also brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you. Hello again. Taking a break from reactions and stuff like that. We will be doing something a little bit different, something I had brought up doing before. And with Thor Love and Thunder coming out, I thought it seemed like a good time. I'm going to give you my thoughts and essentially just give you a review of this huge graphic novel, the Saga of, or what is it called? Jane Foster, the Saga of the Mighty Thor. And real quick thoughts. Great cover art here. How many issues? I'll go ahead and, what issues does this cover? This is Thor number 1 through 4. I don't know what volume it is. And then 6 through 8. Thor number 5. Thor Annual number 1. Mighty Thor 1 through 5. 8 through 11. 13, 14. And Generations, The Unworthy Thor and the Mighty Thor. So it's quite a thick graphic novel. Largely great artwork. I will tell you straight up, I will be spoiling the ever-loving shit out of this. So if you don't want spoilers and just want a quick spoiler-free review, I liked it. I didn't think... This isn't like the greatest graphic novel I've ever read, but overall it's very good. I like the character of Jane Foster as Thor. I like what they did with her. I like how she's uncertain about a lot of her new role and trying to figure out exactly what it means to be Thor. You know, she wants to stand up and well represent Thor because she has a huge amount of respect for Thor. I mean, it's something to be said for the original Thor that this is his ex-girlfriend and she has a huge amount of respect for him. But she does, and she wants to well represent the mantle while also, doing a good job herself. And I like how she struggles with that. It's overall a good book. And I will be spoiling it now. And one of the first things I want to get out of the way while spoiling this is, I've seen it with the Neurotic video, them freaking out, oh my god, Natalie Portman didn't really work out. Those muscles on her are computer generated.
Oopsie, it looks like somebody forgot an effect shot here.
Ooh. And I'm going to go ahead and give you my thoughts, especially after reading it. Is that I could see them going either way. I could see them asking her to work out and get really buff, or I could see them actually asking her not to. Now, why? Spoiler. In this comic book, Jane Foster has late-stage cancer. She is very thin and very frail, and is essentially dying. She gets around all right. She's not, like, on death's door, but she is not looking good. Jane Foster is very thin in this comic book. Now, when she becomes Thor, she gets all buff and powerful, but that's not who she is in the day. That is one of the most interesting aspects of this graphic novel, because she does chemotherapy. The problem is every time she becomes Thor, she loses the chemotherapy treatments, but the cancer remains. Their best shot to stop the cancer is to stop turning into Thor. But she's scared what will happen to the world if there isn't a Thor there to help save it. And she likes being Thor, so she continues to do it even though it's very likely going to kill her in the end. And it's very interesting. This comic book does not conclude that story. It's something she deals with throughout. And that's actually something I do want to bring up, because the very title of this graphic novel, Jane Foster, the Saga of the Mighty Thor, is actually kind of a spoiler, because if you read the first few issues, you actually don't know who Thor is. You know there's a Lady Thor. That's all you know. And in fact, throughout the first few issues, you have Thor, Odin's son. And it's good to specify because Even though Thor grants Jane the usage of the name Thor, Odin's son is still his name. So he's largely called Odin's son, and it's usually specified he is Odin's son. Throughout a lot of that, he is looking for the secret identity of the new Thor. And you even have this checklist of all these women. And it turns out being kind of cool, because at the end, well, not at the end of that section of the story, probably like I would say Act 1 essentially of this graphic novel, you end up having this big old fight where Thor joins Jane Foster, but he's also joined by all the women that he had asked if they were Thor, and you get this huge woman team up scene, essentially kind of like an A-Force scene in Endgame, except in Endgame it felt a little unnatural. I liked it, but it felt a little unnatural. Here it works perfectly in the story, and it does the exact same thing. Well done. The main villains in this book are Malekith and Dario Agger, and I have to admit, I've never read a comic book with Malekith before. And he is kind of an interesting character, because he's kind of like Loki, except if Loki... The best way to describe Malekith, Loki is Malekith, except a bit more sane. Yes, Malekith is essentially more insane Loki. Loki has his issues and he has his trickery. Malekith is just looking for fucking chaos in this. His big storyline is he's working with Dario Agger, who's a big businessman, getting resources. He is seeding a war between the Dark Elves, which is his kingdom, and the Light Elves, Alfheim. I can pronounce Alfheim. His kingdom is like Starfelheim or something, and I know I'm slaughtering that. But there's this huge war going on between them. And then throughout this huge graphic novel, this storyline's going on. And the ending does not resolve it, unfortunately. That's part of my problem with this graphic novel. And I understand that, like, you're not going to get a clean ending with a lot of comic book stories. But I was kind of hoping for more of a conclusive ending to that. And in the end, it just kind of concludes with a big old fight between Malekith and a couple of his people, and Jane and a couple of her friends. And it's a big old battle, and it's a good battle, but that's about it. Now, it's worth talking about, because I do feel like I got jumped ahead a little bit. The book begins with Mjolnir on the moon. Thor wants to pick it up, but he can't, because Nick Fury whispered something to him, and ever since Nick Fury whispered something to him, he cannot pick it up. What he whispered to him is something I'm sure I could look up on Wikipedia, but I haven't, and this book does not tell me. And I am interested what that is. And there are, if you notice, it jumps around a little bit, and there are books that are missing, comic books. And it seems like those comic books probably dealt with Thor Odin's son. And I know this is the saga of Jane Foster, Thor. But I'm really interested what those missing books were, where they focus more on Thor Odin's son. I would like to see what those stories are. I feel like they would give me a bit more. Not really a criticism of the actual comic books, but a criticism of the compilation and what books they chose. And again, like, this is already super thick, so they probably don't want to pad it with too much. That being said, it's already super thick. A couple more books isn't going to kill it. Oh yes, I do want to bring up one more thing I want to bring up in here that I thought was kind of weak. Because overall, like I said, I think it's a very good story. But there's one of the very early crimes that Jane Foster Thor fights. Let's see if I can find the names here. I know Absorbing Man's with the group, but it's essentially some thieves. She stops and she fights them. And then a woman who's like the leader of the thieves. Here we go. What is her name? Titania. Titania decides that they will surrender to her because she is a woman, and they're both women, so she decides she will surrender to Jane Foster Thor. I'm sorry, that's super weak sauce. No way in hell. It's so dumb. So, like, absorbing man in Titania will agree to go to prison for potentially the rest of their lives because Jane Foster's a woman and lady power. I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. That's like 3 pages of like over 100 pages though. It's a nitpick, but something that I really didn't like. That being said, overall, I've said what I like. I like the character of Jane Foster in this book. I like what she has to go through, her personal struggles, her wanting to carry on the Thor name, her thinking that name has value and meaning, and that being very important to her. But also, every time she becomes Thor, that cancer gets an upper edge on her chemotherapy. It brings her a little bit closer to dying every time she does it. And I love that struggle. I think it's fantastic. And speaking of Mjolnir, something I definitely want to talk about is Mjolnir seems to have more of a sentience in this than I ever was aware of. Mjolnir is essentially attacking people for Jane and helping her out in a lot of ways. There's even a moment where Mjolnir is able to look like Jane Foster because S.H.I.E.L.D. finds out that Jane Foster is Thor. Then Mjolnir shows up looking like Jane Foster while Thor's there. And S.H.I.E.L.D's like, oh fuck, we would kind of sworn you were Jane Foster. And I think that's interesting. That's something else I'd like to see them explore. I don't know if they'll do a volume 2 of this, but volume 1 was good. It feels incomplete. But overall, it's very good. I will say, reading this with Malekith, the movie does such a disservice to him. One of the things I thought was interesting was when I was reading Malekith, I almost felt like his dialogue almost had a sing-songy quality. Let me see if I can see a good line for it. But, like, when I read his dialogue, like, if I'd read it normal, your realm has served its purpose, my queen. My army has been fed and blooded, and now it marches to claim far greater prizes, but not without leaving you a little something to remember us by. Evil and sinister. But I always felt like I would, when I read it to my son, I would give it like a sing-song quality, which I felt like flowed really well with how he would speak. Your realm has served its purpose, my queen. My army has been fed and blooded. Now it marches to claim far greater prizes, but not without leaving you a little something to remember us by. He has way more flavor in this book, just reading that, than he ever had in that goddamn Dark World movie. And it's such a disappointment, because Christopher Eccleston is a great actor, and they gave him nothing to work with.
Your universe was never meant to be. Your world and your family will be extinguished!
Cool.
But yes, this book understands Malekith way more than that movie did. That's for damn sure. But like I said, I wish it was more conclusive, but overall it's a good story. It's a good book. It's worth checking out.
They think order and chaos are somehow opposites and try to control what won't be.
I used to fuck guys like you in prison.